All right, well, I will do my best to deliver on that introduction. By the end, you can judge if I've succeeded or not. So, I am Christopher, and I'm going to be talking about scale-free money. This presentation has 50 slides, which I realize is horribly ambitious for 20 minutes, so I will do what I can, and someone please tell me if I'm running out of time. Right. I want to start first with a content warning, maybe of a slightly different sort than you're used to, which is here be theoretical dragons. The content in this talk is speculative and has not been mathematically verified. Just so you know, buyer beware. So I want to start by motivating this a little bit by the following observation, at least of mine, which is that crypto is stuck in a wheel. This wheel relies on three inputs, primarily three inputs: public capital, which funds, ultimately funds the events, the development, the production, the salaries, this conference. Public credibility, which is how new people become aware of crypto as a social movement, as a thing they can participate in, and credibility is required in order for them to consider participating in it. And internal cultural integrity, which is what sustains any kind of self-understanding as a movement, any kind of ability to enforce cultural norms, etc. Those three inputs, at least at the moment, I think are being kind of unsustainably used up, right? We're not reproducing them as fast as we're consuming them, especially, well, really all three of these things, but especially recently, the first two. And we do get some outputs from the crypto wheel as it rolls around. It produces some progress in applied cryptography. We've, I think, helped with that. And it produces some progress in what people are very hesitant to call, but what actually is database engineering. Terribly unsexy name, but it's important. There are a lot of databases in the world. But this wheel is unsustainable. I think it's self-terminating. So if we want to think about what will it take to break the wheel, I think we need to first ask ourselves the question of what is crypto? And there are a lot of definitions, and I don't claim to have one true definition. But I want to put a few things on this chart to sort of give a picture of how these different definitions play out in the world as we find ourselves at the moment. So one thing crypto might understand itself as, or at least one thing which crypto does a lot of, is database engineering. Database engineering is not new. Databases have been around since like 1960s. Database engineering is not a product, it's a backend. Database engineering is actually needed. There are a lot of databases. It would be great if we could make them better. Database engineering, however, is not interesting. I kind of wanted to put sexy on this, but we'll just say interesting. Next one, applied cryptography. Crypto does do, crypto means cryptography, right? Crypto does do some applied cryptography. The applied cryptography, especially the applied ZK, MPC, and autonomous TEE stuff, is indeed new. At least there's a lot of new applied research there. It is not a product, it's backend. It is actually needed, and it is interesting. But it's not like, this is, say, a part, but not the whole, right, of what we need to produce in order to offer something interesting to the world. Crypto has contained a lot of Ponzi schemes. Ponzi schemes they're not new. They've been around for a long, long time. They are a product. I mean, they're user-facing. You can do something with Ponzi schemes. But they're not actually needed, and at least to me, they're not particularly interesting. Another thing that crypto sometimes tries to do is kind of replace Web 2. And this one, I think, is sort of close to breaking the wheel, but it's not quite there. Replacing Web 2 is new. I mean, if we're actually providing some kind of new protocol substrate to replace what were previously just a bunch of SaaS products, that's new. It is a product, or you can build products that replace Web 2 products and use different backends. It is actually needed, but it is just not very interesting, because most of the products that you build by replacing Web 2 are like, like a car hailing app, but the backend is decentralized and it has better long-term socioeconomic properties. And this is important, but it's this sort of long, sort of plodding institutional march to try and reform the economic system that doesn't. It's not very flashy, right? And it doesn't provide. It's very hard to do this alone to shift the equilibrium, because much of the reason that Web 2 companies are so powerful has more to do with capital structures than technology. And so if you only change the technology, you're just not really going to change the social equilibrium, right? It's not sufficient. So the final thing, which crypto sometimes does understand itself as, but where I would argue the understanding is insufficient, is as a new monetary system. And this, I think, checks all four boxes. A new monetary system, if it is actually new, is something that the world doesn't have yet. It is a product. It is actually needed, and I'm going to spend most of the rest of the talk arguing why, and I think it is interesting. But it's not working. So I went to CoinMarketCap this morning, and I scrolled down and I checked, how many cryptocurrencies are there on CoinMarketCap today, and we are at 9,931, which have of course been good enough at political lobbying to get themselves onto CoinMarketCap. Now kind of difficult. So we're at nearly 10,000 cryptocurrencies and no new monetary system found. Something is wrong, right? Making more ain't gonna help. And I think really the problem, as I see it, is that we have a lack of a clear understanding of what money is or how to use it. And in the absence of a clear understanding, it's not like we act with no understanding, like we don't throw up our hands. Instead, we act on some implicit understanding which structures how capital moves in the space. And right now, that implicit understanding is mostly USD as money. So when people say market cap, they say it as if market cap were some kind of like objective scientific term that describes a feature of the world, but this is just a lie. Market cap is a measure of things that is in almost always US dollars, which is, to Julio's earlier talk, some notion invented by the US government, and whatever it measures, like if we define our success based on that one, we're just not going to produce anything interesting. So this talk is about, one, what is a theory of money? I'll try to sketch that. Two, a candidate theory, which I call scale-free money. And three, why should crypto care? Followed by a conclusion. So what is a theory of money? Skip that. This like whole talk is sort of conceptual terrorism, and I am not going to dive into the anthropological record. I'm just going to try and define money in a way that I think allows us to analyze our specific problem now. So for the purposes of this presentation, money is a giant symbolic database. It has different tokens, different denominations with units and owners. Money, this database, what makes this database money, as opposed to like some other databases which are not money, is that it's endowed with some social semantics, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the database details for reasoning about how to use money, how to think about money, the details of the database don't matter. Whether this is like the EVM or the SVM or frankly Microsoft Excel, it doesn't matter. What is a user? So this, user is not always the best term, but user, for my purposes, is whoever is using money. So a user acts in the world. They might possess physical resources. They have freedom. They can choose what to do, and they can read from and write to this database, right? They can see what their balance is, they can see what changes other people make, they can send money to people, etc. And in particular, a user has preferences. If your users don't want anything, there's no point designing coordination systems. Okay, what is a theory of money? A theory of money is a mathematical construction that specifies how to use this database as a tool, right? How to use this database from the perspective of a user to move the world towards a state that they prefer. So note in particular that this is a theory of how to use money as means, not how to use money as end, right? It's like we've got this database has some numbers, so we don't care about the numbers, we care about the world, but we want to be able to reason about how we change these numbers to somehow influence the world in a way that is valuable to us. So here's some questions which are not relevant here to how I have defined a theory of money. One question which is not relevant is why do we have money? This theory of money lives in the world of it's chilling in the world of platonic forms, along with a number two. The number two is just there. Two doesn't exist or not exist based on why we have it. It's, maybe someone conceptualized it for a reason, but two is just there. I'm also not relevant. What is the history of money? That is a great topic, which I'm not an expert in. But luckily, if you define mathematical abstractions clearly, you could at least define them clearly and then determine whether or not they apply to history. Another question which is not relevant, what is the one true money? Yeah, I don't care about that one. And finally, the question which is often confused with the question of what is money that I'm not talking about is what is valuable. So, in my definition here, a theory of money must have three things. One, it must have inputs, which are choices that the user makes. Two, it must have outputs, which are outcomes. These don't necessarily have to be quantitative. They could be qualitative, but things that the user is measuring, what they're observing in the world. Three, it has a causal model, which is how these inputs and the inputs of other users affect the outputs, right? How do you use the database to achieve changes that you want in the world? So some example inputs to a theory, to money, right? Let's just say we have many different tokens. Some example inputs. You could accept a token in exchange for an act. I accept some dollars. I give you a sandwich. You could hold a token. I hold some, DAO tokens. I participate in governance over issuance. Theoretically, if I held US dollars, I would have some influence in governance. And sometimes that works, but not the way we want it to, which is weird. I could spend a token in exchange for, hopefully for some act, maybe I want a sandwich. I could swap one token for another token, or I could lend a token, perhaps with collateral and another. These are just 5 kind of general types of inputs, right? There are more, but here are some important ones. Outputs. Some example outputs. Here I'm often going to segment the outputs into two categories. The first are sort of an act or goods. These will maybe look a little bit more like private goods, and these are individual and immediate. So if I hand over some dollars and get a sandwich, like the immediate output is that I get a sandwich. If I pay someone to cut down some wood, the immediate output is that a tree gets cut down, I get some wood, right? But with I'm going to argue with every use of money, there is also always a composite or collective output. And the collective output, let's say in the case of sandwiches, is that I support the supply chain in the world that produces sandwiches. Or at least collectively everyone who buys sandwiches is doing this, right? Collective output in the case of paying for a bunch of wood to cut down might be an increase in carbon emissions because less carbon is sequestered by the trees. So the causal model is the relationship between inputs and outputs. Now there are two aspects of this that we might care about. The first is causation in the database. This is just like if there are many different assets and they're related to each other in different ways, they have mutual credit, liquidity lines, etc. There's some causation in the database. When I take one action, I can analyze what other assets get affected. But the much more complex and sort of usually the model that we really care about here is the causation outside the database. So for example, if I want to reason about how my actions affect the climate, I actually need to have a model of how the climate works. This is not trivial, right? Luckily though, it's outside of our theory of money. It doesn't have to do with how the database works. It has to do only with the world. So I do want to distinguish, actually, I'm going to skip those slides. Right, okay. The great challenge. The great challenge in thinking about theories of money and what we might want out of a theory of money is that money is an intersubjective tool, meaning that the effects of using money, the effects of taking action in this database are entirely conditioned on the beliefs and actions of others. So if let's use a hypothetical to demonstrate this. So suppose that like I have monetary database 1 called ChrisCoin, and you have monetary database 2 called like BobCoin, right? And I make some changes in ChrisCoin and you don't see them because you don't care about ChrisCoin. My changes will have no impact, right? So there's only value, or not. Maybe that's not the word I want to use here, but in order to reason about what is going to happen as a result of making some change in the distribution of money, I need to be able to know what theories of money other people have, right? I need to also know what what expectations they have out of this system. So my case here is that we would really benefit from trying to come up with a neutral theory of money. And by neutral, I mean value neutral. Currently, the world has implicit theories of money, like X, BTC is money, USD is money. As I define it, these are not actually theories of money. They're just attempts to convince people that a particular token is valuable, but they usually use these words. And we spend a lot of time fighting over this, which seems wholly unproductive. So to me, neutrality in the context of a theory of money means that the theory of money does not itself make any decisions about what is valuable, right? It doesn't say that you should want this thing or you should want this other thing or this thing is good or this thing is bad. The expectation, at least implicitly here, is that people will always disagree on values and values change over time, and we're not going to embed them in a theory anyways. But that people could potentially agree on a theory and provide some greater clarity to this sort of interpersonal or this coordination that we're engaged in if the theory makes no decisions about what is valuable. So the basic idea of scale-free money is that we associate different denominations of money with different values. So if you were to, say, start from scratch, let's say you have a society, you want to create a new monetary system and run it with scale-free money, you would find some values, associate denominations with those values, and use issuance from different denominations to fund progress towards whatever specific actions you think will advance those values. And you can use these different denominations could have different governance structures. Some of them could be, I don't know, more hierarchical, more direct democratic. There can be a lot of plurality here. And you continuously adjust. And the main mechanism by which you continuously adjust is by changing denominations, right? So as opposed to having one, primary currency and you send that currency around to different companies or something like this, as even we still do in the crypto space, most people are paying for their flights and tickets here using USD, right? You are continuously adjusting denominations. Gonna skip. So in order to make that plausible, one thing you need is some technological infrastructure to make the separation of unit of account, medium of exchange, and store of value choices seamless. Right now you pay a large tax for kind of not agreeing on these things or on one or many of these things with the person you're trying to interact with. And if we can reduce that tax, this becomes more feasible. So this is where some crypto technology can come in handy. Gonna skip that. So one aspect of scale-free money that I think is important and touches upon also an earlier point Julio made in his talk is that if you look at sort of the locus of monetary control versus scale of governance in our world today, there's this really like a bipolar graph, right? There are a few local currencies, and maybe people have some amount of control in certain jurisdictions. They have some amount of control at the local level. Then there's a big gap in between, and then there are like, I don't know, 10 or 20 nation-state currencies that really matter, right? So there's a lot of power at the top. There's a little bit of power at the bottom and of the scale graph, right? And basically nothing in between. And in a world of scale-free money, we would be able to balance control across scale, maybe not exactly equally, but at least a little bit less asymmetrically, right? So as a refresher, the theory is a causal model, and I'm just going to quickly discuss what these actions can do in the context of scale-free money, right? So accepting a token, again, there are always going to be two effects, the individual and collective. So accepting a token creates an offer. You may potentially receive the token in question, hand over your sandwich. And you also, in some sense, you lend weight to the objective associated with that denomination. So let's use the example of $1. So if I have a sandwich and I offer to give you the sandwich in exchange for $1, I am supporting the American military. Weird as it may sound, right? And is that what I really wanted to do? I mean, maybe, but often we don't think about it. Spending creates an offer of it. I got to skip some of this stuff. Sorry, come find me later. Okay, so scale-free money, I'm going to argue without a lot of justification, is neutral, which is that it is a theory of, not a theory about what denominations of money are supposed to mean or which meanings would be good or bad. It's just a theory about how actions in the database relate to, as a result of who holds what currency or what kind of issuance is happening from what currency/denomination, how actions in the database relate to kind of those action potentials, or even you could say those like structures of political power outside it, right? And this, I think, gives us the possibility of having a theory which people who have different values can still agree on, right? People who have different values can still agree on what the integers are. They may disagree on like how to use the integers, right? But they can agree on what they are. And this is helpful because it allows them to talk to each other clearly. So scale-free money related to this conference is public goods first, I would argue, in a way that our existing system is not. Issuance can fund public goods. And if there are a lot of denominations and a lot of issuance, this kind of public goods funding model is pretty different than individual charity, right? If your system is focused on production and funding of public goods, you don't have the free rider problem anymore. Of course, what people individually produce still has an impact on how much kind of voting weight they get, let's say. But you no longer need to, this isn't such a big problem. And at least executed well, scale-free money has the potential to make public goods production competitive, which I think is pretty important. Efficiency in public goods production also matters, and here we can have governance at multiple levels. So, I have like 1 minute left, right? Okay, right. Skip. Okay, another reason I think this is important is right now, I think crypto lacks a vision of what a world with crypto would look like that isn't just we will make you rich in the existing system. If you look at how most people, especially in, I don't know, in the US with FTX or in other places where people are getting pitched crypto as an investment class, and basically the pitch is buy some cryptocurrencies now and next year you can sell them and you will have more dollars. This is a horrible, horrible pitch. If we want to, I mean, A, one, people don't believe it anymore, which is justified, and B, it's not very interesting. They're just, there are other ways to make more dollars if that's really what you want. And glimpse of alternative world. Right, okay. Where is this? No, that slide didn't work. Okay. Right. The one last slide I want to give you here is that I think an advantage of scale-free money applied in crypto, right, if we dog food our own theories, is that it would greatly increase the plurality and diversity of kinds of public goods production that we can internally fund. Right now, crypto has a very sort of base layer heavy capital structure, right? These like L1s, or everyone wants to be the base layer infra because there's some implicit theory that being the base layer infra, which is really like the same theory as valuation of SaaS companies or whatever, there's some implicit theory that being base layer infra will make money or capture value, and that applications or other things are useless. And I think this theory is wrong, but right now this theory is structuring how capital allocation works, right? And so this means that we can't, People won't invest in tokens for research guilds or tokens for vertically integrated applications or tokens for autonomous TEEs or tokens just for like independent public goods production that isn't associated with some blockchain that can capture fee revenue. And if we can dogfood our own theory here and increase the plurality of goods that can be funded, I think we can move towards a much more coherent product offering for the world. All right. Sorry I skipped so many slides, but thank you very much. And come find me after if you have questions.